Hey, Wyatt, thanks for joining us today. As way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Thanks, Brian. So I'm a sales rep for Splunk. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I've been in Las Vegas for, it's probably been 8 years or so now, by way of Phoenix for a couple of years, and then Seattle before that.
Yeah. And how'd that work out? Because it's usually not a technology city, is it?
No, Vegas is interesting. I worked for Microsoft at the time when I moved here, and they were just looking to increase their presence here and get a little bit deeper. The Vegas customers and the community here is very tight knit. So you see people move from place to place, and
Yeah.
they tend to not really like the kind of teams that parachute in, make a bunch of promises, and then punch out, because it's often covered from Phoenix and LA and the other places, Denver sometimes. So they respond a lot better to local presence.
Cool. And is the market more than gambling and entertainment, or?
That's my primary focus. There is a bit other, industry here. There's the gas company and power company and a couple airlines and such as well. But right now, currently, my primary focus is the gaming industry. And I also have a couple of customers up in Salt Lake City too.
And did you do the engineering, the SE thing to sales rep, or? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a career change for sure. And it took me a long time to kind of get to trying to move into that role. I've been on the track for a while, but as you probably know, a lot of sales managers, they just don't want to take that risk. And you might have the skill set or have the ability to do it, but they don't want to do it. I've been told so many times, well, why would I move an SE over to this role where I can get a sales rep that's been doing it for 20 years and just slot them in, and they know exactly what they're doing, which there's some truth to that, but then also we've had some success. So
Well, plus especially when you're being successful in the SE role.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it really, with a super technical sale like Splunk is,
Yeah.
I have an unfair advantage because I have the ability to understand the technology a little deeper, and the customers tend to trust me a little bit more, I think, because of that. So hopefully they do.
That's it. My background was similar, mostly super technology focused products. And it was almost the inverse. They only wanted to promote SEs into sales. But
Yeah.
but but then you get the challenge of sometimes that transition's not easy.
No, it's not for everybody, definitely. And a lot of the SEs I talk to, even nowadays, they call me a lot, and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I the funny thing I tell them is, you have a very good life right now. Your life is very good. If you want your life to be complex and hard and difficult, then go this direction. But just know and understand that what you have going on right now is completely different, and it will change when you move into carrying a bag. So
Right. It's not just that now you get comped on the deals that you close or participate in.
yeah,
It's that you're now responsible. And I think,
solely.
and how you get treated
Yeah.
is dramatically different.
It is. Indeed, it is. And the level of responsibility, the level of stress, the level of self-imposed stress, that was probably the hardest thing for me. Thinking about this podcast before, it was what lessons have I learned, and that was probably the biggest one over the last couple of years, is to really look at the things you can change and influence them the best you can.
Yeah.
And the things you can't, you just have to hope for the best. And that's the lesson I've been taught so many times, but it never really completely sunk. And especially last year was such a crazy year where we had so many factors going on in the world, where there was pandemic, and we had the riots and stuff that was going on, and so much instability, and just didn't know what was going from day to day. And at the end of it all, you have to just be able to relax and change the things you can change and hope for the best for the things you can't.
Well, plus your market was dramatically hit by that, I assume.
Yeah, the casinos were shut down. This is the first time the casinos shut their doors and locked them since JFK was assassinated in 1963. And that was only for a day. So casinos were shut down here for months. And it just wasn't a very that's my little boy just came in to give me a green tea. So it was just a crazy time right now. So
yeah. So tell me about that journey. What were some of the important steps or epiphanies you had along the way?
So early on, I realized that I was a really good SE, right? I was a top performer as an SE, and I realized that my value to an organization would be a lot more if I could just get a chance at the sales role. And oftentimes SEs want to move to that job, like you mentioned, to get compensated for it. It wasn't really about that as a driver for me. It was about that challenging myself to see if I could do that, and then also realizing at the end of that that I can, of course. And then the compensation is great because it goes along with it. But my value I bring to the customers and to the company, I think, was greater in that journey. Now, I had to take a lot of steps to get there. I had to insert myself as an SE, as an engineer or SA or whatever, the term you want to call it. I had to insert myself into conversations that normally they don't, like contract negotiations, like deal structuring and licensing discussions, those type of things that are typically done by the sales rep. I would want to be involved in those. I would volunteer for it. Hey, I want to listen in legal contract discussions. I want to listen in. I want to learn how the mechanics of that work. And I think that was a big benefit to me too. And then having good mentors. I think the most important thing for me, and I still recommend that to folks, is get yourself a mentor. And get yourself a mentor outside of your company and outside of your management structure. Someone that's different, someone you've worked with historically. Because if you have that, you can bounce ideas off of them. You can talk to them. I still have a couple of really good mentors that I speak to on a very regular basis. And just about not necessarily deal structure or work mechanics or stuff, but life things as well too. Just like, what do you think about what's going on, or how do you approach this, or relationships with your children or your marriage, and those type of things. Having a good mentor is, I think, very, very important.
Yeah, and then you moved back into pre-sales, did you?
Yeah. So at Microsoft, I was kind of this. It was a weird role where I was responsible for the deployment. So my number was around deployment of the cloud technologies, and when I came to the end of my journey at Microsoft, I decided, well, if I'm going to get back into this, I got to start over as an SE. So I just went to Splunk and went as a sales engineer. And sales engineers are super technical, and it was a journey to get there. I interviewed 26 times across about 6 months, and that's not typical, but it's somewhat, it's rough. But anyway, so I made it as the SE back in Splunk, and I didn't immediately start to start knocking on that door, because I just wanted to be excellent at what I was at the time, and that's always been my goal, is do really good right now. This is the job I'm in right now. I want to be the best I could be right now. And so after a couple of years of that, I realized that, well, they actually, the sales management came and approached me and said, hey, we think you're the right guy for this in Vegas. We're going to build a territory there, and we want you to fill that role. And it worked. And it was the right timing, the right opportunity, the right situation. And I thought for a while I wanted to go to leadership, SE leadership, and go in that direction. And at that juncture, I was like, well, if I do this, then I'll always be a better SE leader. I'll always be a better manager, because I'll understand what's going on, and I'll have a good feeling and a good solid understanding of what that rep is going through. And so far I'm happy. Things are going good. So,
and how about you go from like a mega brand to kind of a challenger, up and coming company, still pretty well known in a certain space.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that was interesting too. Microsoft, the funny thing about that is that I'd been at Microsoft for 8 years. And when you start interviewing outside of there, people don't take you seriously. They're like, hey, your skills are either stale, you're not keeping up, or you got it great there, you don't want to leave. And I found that quite a bit. And once you kind of break through that, then, Splunk I started here right before the $1 billion crest, and there's still hyper growth and doing some really good stuff. So it was really good timing for that. But yeah, it's definitely, I started with about 35, 40 customers I worked with, and now I'm down to 7. So you know what that means? That's just hyper growth, right? They're just pushing out the customers to different segments and such. So,
and how have you done, because that transition piece, you're still comfortable with the technical stuff, that you feel at home there. And
I have to make myself stop on that. I have to actually trust my engineer team. I have to pull them in the right times. I do have the luxury where I don't need them for everything, because some of my peers, they rely on them for every single meeting, even this qualification discovery calls. I don't need that. but you do have to be able to balance and understand what your swim lane is. And I find that to be the best way to go. Trust my team, trust my peripheral members, and that works best.
And how about as far as like that first enterprise deal you did on your own?
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I came into a territory, after making that transition, I had zero pipeline. It just been blown out completely. And we're staring at a, limited customer set, trying to figure out what we're going to do for the year. And you kind of start to just go with what you know, right? You make a plan and say, this is what I'm going to do for the year. And the old adage of plan the work and work the plan, that's real. I mean, you have to. And if you're just flying by the seat of your pants, I see that happen a lot. And those folks aren't very successful. So the first deal we did was a pretty major cloud conversion from an on-prem customer, existing customer, but we were pushing them to a cloud, which is a pretty big difference. And going through that motion and negotiating a new cloud-based contract, and I learned a lot, took a lot of arrows, just had some really good support structure around me, a good leader at the time, and then also a good inside rep that would help me with some of those things too. So I think that was probably the key to it.
And what do you wish you knew when you were that first year?
Well, it's kind of like that, what I said before, the adage of, plan the work, work the plan, and then also do the right things and good things will happen to you. Always, work with high integrity, do what's good for the customer, and then it will come back to you. Now, that's not to say that bad things happen to good people. They do. I mean, there's some things you just can't control. Yeah. And I had that first year, I had an experience with that was just devastating. And, but, at the end of it, you let those lessons sink in, control what you can control, and just, be persistent, be consistent, and do what's right for your customers. And that's what I really had to have it sink in after that first year.
And was it that your BS meter wasn't tuned yet?
Because I had a lens of an engineer, right? Yeah, I was looking at everything as a technical guy. And then you have to, your BS meter, you're right. You're spot on with that, because you have to understand when you're an SE and you're working with a customer, you're trying to solve their technical problem. When you're the sales rep, you're trying to, solve a bigger picture problem, and help them with a commercial problem potentially too. And so just having to change that lens was the challenge, I think.
And how about as far as like getting bigger and bigger deals? Because that's what turns reps on. As an SE, you might, let's just get this A deal done.
Yeah.
The easiest deal.
You become linear as an SE and somewhat serial, right? You don't have a parallel approach to things. You just like, this is what we're doing. We're solving this problem right now. And so having that parallel approach was another aspect. So the first one was, I had a pretty healthy quota that year, and my first deal knocked out a good substantial part of that. And then I felt, wow, I got my legs under me. It took 6 months, but you get your legs under you. And then you get that first commission check. You're like, whoa, we can do this. This is fun. And so then you had a few others that we worked through. And then my leadership had left at the time. There was some of them had separated from the company just on their own. They went to a different place. And so I was left to kind of do some things on my own. So after that first one, you kind of get, oh yeah, this is great. I know exactly what I'm doing. And we can do this. Well, then I did a monster deal with my customer, different one. And it would have put me at about 225% of my quota for the first year. Well, at the end of that, come to find out, I just was flying by the seat of my pants, and I didn't really know exactly what I was doing because I was new. I was a rookie. I had all these other things. Well, there was a nuance with the deal that I ended up not getting credit for. So the company got credit, the customer got a great deal, but I and my team didn't get quota relief. We didn't get quota retirement. We didn't get any kind of compensation for it. It was just like, sorry, too bad. And so then that creates this spiraling approach of, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right role? Self-doubt, imposter syndrome, some of those things that we all face as sales reps, and we know that stuff's there, but it's hard to talk about. And to come to grips with that has been really good for me personally on a lot of levels too. And what helped me really kind of push through that is the new leadership came in, and my first one-on-one, They said, tell me what happened here. Kind of what happened so I can avoid this and then not let that happen to other people. And so then you can also understand you. So I kind of laid it out and said it was literally a nuance in the way that the booking was and quoting done, but it was there's no, they have to draw a hard line on the exceptions. So he put his arm around me, more metaphorically speaking, said, look, I like you. You're going to need to either get over this and get past it or leave the company. I don't want you to leave, but that's the best advice I can give you. And that was hard at the time. It was hard to take because I was like, whoa, that hit me like a brick upside the head. But looking back on it, that was $1 million worth of advice from someone who recognized and had been there and gave me good advice in that situation where I needed it. And I was at the time, whenever you get feedback, you have to be ready to take the feedback too. Right? Feedback's a gift. So if you're not ready to take it, it feels like an insult. At the time, I was ready to take it, and I did. I got past it, moved on, and the next year we, crushed it again. So it was looking back on those type of situations. I think that's really what separates the top reps from the not top reps. Having a short memory. So
it's a short memory.
you have to not rest on your laurels and your success, because guess what? What have you done for me lately? Yep. Right. And then also, if you have situations that are rough and you need to get past them, get past them. Because what's in the past is in the past.
And it's not going to change.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
they're really that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of leaders try and soften it by not telling you that. And you believe it, but you're kind of like, well, maybe they'll fix it. But they're not going to fix it.
What I've also learned is they're just as limited on what they can do as we are, right? So I mean, there's like 14 layers up the chain that they make the decisions, and all their job is to really do is to make sure you're mitigating risk.
Right. And the same thing happens at, in most companies in January, February, March, the quotas get assigned. Yep. And maybe there's some wiggle room, but by the time you get your written comp plan, it's done. Yep. And you can whine and complain for another 3 months, but then the year's half over.
Yep. And then you have to just really get after it. Every first of the year, I stare at my number and my comp plan. I'm like, it's going to take a miracle to get this done. And then at the end of the year, you're like, wow, how did that happen? We got it done. And maybe you did perform a miracle, and maybe you didn't, but it's going to be the same next year. And that's what we just have to plan the work, I guess, and then work it. So.
And what turns you on as a rep? Now, was it that commission check? Was it that first few successes, or earning the respect of management or the customer?
So I think for SEs, it's a respect from management. It's recognition from your peers and that kind of stuff. And so, I still have a little bit of that, linger. I like, to get a trophy. I mean, I have a whole shelf of them back there. You can see. So you like to have that recognition. I've been interviewing a lot of candidates right now because we're filling a couple empty spots, and I've been in the interview loops. And one of the questions I always ask is, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? Yeah. And I was a sports competitor in high school and in college, and I really hated to lose because I believe winning should be automatic. If you do all the right things and mitigate your risk, you're going to win. And so hating to lose is my personal. Now I get various answers to that question all the time, because there's no right or wrong answer to it. It's just how how to get to know you kind of question. So that loving to win and seeing the results of that, not necessarily in the commission check, because that's going to just happen, right? I mean, that's part of what we do, and it's nice to get paid for your work and such, but learning that you don't always get paid for your work, sometimes you just kind of really understand that too. But that success that the customers go through, and when they actually get a project, they get it rolled out, they're at the end of it, and we're all high-fiving each other, saying, look, we got this done, we accomplished it. That's what I love. That's what's driving me and keeping me going.
But that is also a key distinction that I've seen between great SEs and okay SEs. The ones that brush it off their shoulder and say next, Uh-uh. I want
Yeah,
the one who's like, it's WTF, right? It's like that, because
yeah,
as a salesperson, what that question reveals is like, what do you care about? And do you care? The person who
yeah.
can brush off a loss too easily
Uh,
isn't going to
I
work.
agree with you on that. Yeah, it's and you can't, but you have to have a short memory, right?
You
You
got to
can't
move
you can't
on.
dwell on it forever. But the key is you got to learn from that, learn from what
Yes.
happened, and keep that as in your memory, but don't dwell on the negative aspects of it. But I agree with you. It's um, I hate to be in the loser's chair. It just is. It's
Right.
personally.
Because you have to have that energy, that passion as a salesperson,
Yeah.
and it has to come
To
from
keep driving.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what else do you look for in reps?
So, I like to see people that are self-motivated. I've been interviewing for the SE role right now, and that's the loops we're doing, because I'm the token rep they put in that loop to because I've kind of got both sides, and so I come in and you gotta can I work with this person? Do they culturally fit? I'm not going to do a technical screening on them, of course, but do they fit? And so what we're looking for in if you're selling a widget or you're selling a cog or a gear or a piece of software or a firewall or whatever it doesn't matter. You can sell that. You can sell anything. It's about the person. Are they personable? Are they going to be a good cultural fit? Are they going to fit with the team? Are they going to do the right things? Are they going to have high integrity? Are they just in it to burn the territory down and then head out in 2 years later? Personally, I'm not about that. I think I have relationships long term with my customers. I consider a lot of them friends, of course, even after they're not my customer anymore. And so in that situation, and there's a lot of sales reps that have a lot of success doing that motion where they just come in, burn it down, move to the next one. And there's people that make tons of money doing that. That's not my style.
No. And what do you like in a manager? Because I think SEs are much more sensitive to it than.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had some really good leaders, some great leaders, and I've had some terrible leaders. So you know what's good and what's not. And so you can understand the difference between the two. Right now, I have a really strong leadership team that's backing me. And I think that the best leaders are ones that can remove blockers and help me engage both from the corporate perspective on my side, and then things that I don't personally know that can give me guidance and help to drive and motivate me to be better at whatever I'm doing. So blockers are important because you always have that. You got to think outside the box. Nothing is ever straightforward. Nothing is ever cut and dry. Here, give me your credit card. We're going to transact that and move on to the next day. That just doesn't happen in enterprise sales like this, right? We're dealing with companies that are Fortune 500, or larger, and you 8-figure transactions don't just happen that way. They don't, and so it's a very complex and
Unnatural.
a lot of moving parts, and people that are not afraid to go straight to the CEO and executives and ask for help, and that's what I think a good leader does. Remove those blockers, filter the crap that's coming down from corporate. So, because you're going to have, are you in Salesforce? Are you doing this? Are you doing your, this plan or that plan? And, really filter out what's important for me to do my job better, and then remove those blockers. I think that's what personally I feel is the best leadership.
And how did you get good at talking to executives? Did you go from something that you're super comfortable with to something that you haven't done before or haven't
That
had to
comes
do?
from, I've had a lot of introspection on that. And it comes from having a sense of fearlessness. And that's a feedback that I've been given too, is just, why not? I'm an executive too, right? As are you, right?
Yeah.
So we're good. So we're at the same level. And have the all due respect, applied, of course, but then just have that level of fearlessness that you just don't feel like you are afraid at the end of the conversation to ask for a next step or ask for the business. If we've had all the requirements, asking for the business is an easy conversation, right? And if you get rejected, that's okay. We're going to get rejected. That's going to happen.
And
Go ahead.
and I got to believe that your deals typically would get stuck because it's new stuff in a way. Other people, isn't there another way to fix this, or isn't there some easier thing without spending money?
Yeah, high competitive pressure nowadays, open source pressure. Is there cheaper ways to do this? Is there easier ways to do this? Those things do get stuck, and you have to prove your value often. And sometimes that value is proven by bits and bytes and numbers and speeds and feeds. And sometimes that value is proven by having good relationships that are solid and trust.
Yeah.
So
And have you been able to translate those speeds and feeds into what the executives care about? Because they don't care about
yeah,
speeds and feeds. They care about the outcome of speeds and feeds.
correct. They don't. In fact, they want their people to worry about the speeds and feeds. They want the outcome, and that's really what it is. And it's a lot of the stuff we do now is mitigating risk, and so it's not a value to the company as in terms of we're going to make you more money. It's we're going to reduce your exposure. And nobody wants to be on the headlines. Nobody wants to be on the front page. Nobody wants their pipeline shut down from Russian hackers.
Ransomware.
Yeah, nobody wants that. And so it's oftentimes you find budget gets freed up more after an incident like that than before. But it's risk mitigation. So you have to be able to speak to that at an executive level where they're not going to be in the newspaper and they don't want to be for the wrong reason.
And what skill would you like to improve most on?
I think prospecting has been hard. And I think any sales rep, even seasoned ones that have been doing it for 25 years, would say that prospecting is hard, and getting even when you're with a recognized name, it's not always easy to get somebody to listen to your message. But I think that's always a place we could do better at. And I think being a better listener too. Not that I'm not, it's just you always want to listen first and understand what the customer's saying to you before you formulate your response. And oftentimes your response can be in the form of another question, and that's okay.
That's good.
Yeah, it's because it gets them to speak more.
And what was it like doing prospecting for the first time?
It's hard.
It is hard.
At first you're like, oh, gung ho, I know what I can do this. They're going to just, I know all these people. They've been here in this market for years. They're just going to respond to me. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So it's again, that short memory, you got to just move. That's all about transaction, right? It's like, smiling and dialing and trying to get more of that traction going. But the first 2 quarters of the year, you do a lot of that. And then you understand, okay, this is where I need to focus my time. And that's low value activity. My high value activity needs to take over.
And how do you regulate the ups and downs, the the success and the rejection?
That has been the absolute hardest part. So if one of the things I was thinking about here is, what are the kind of things that others believe I do that are real or not? What do the others believe that are true or not? About what my job is. And it's that self-imposed stress that you put on yourself, and the highs and lows, because your friends, your family, your peers, your buddies, they only see the extremes. They see that when you win, everybody's high-fiving. They see when you lose, you're sad, or you're frustrated, or you got something going on. Especially the immediate family. They only see the highs, and they only remember, I think, the highs and the lows. And so having to self-regulate that has been probably the biggest challenge, and understanding that you have to just go with it, right? And you can't affect that in other ways. You can't sit down and have a cocktail every single night.
That's not a good idea. No,
that's not a good idea. That's one way to deal with it, but it's not the right way to deal with it.
It's not the healthy way.
No.
Well, that's it. I mean, do you just have that mindset of next, you just move on?
I think you have to learn from your mistakes, but then and learn from the things you can learn from. But you have to move on, right?
Yeah.
And but also when you have the big wins, you can't rest on those laurels either. You can't be like, oh, I was a superstar last year, and so it's going to carry me over the next 3 years. It's not, because what have you done for me lately?
Now
right?
that's different than an SE, right? Because once you become a great SE, it's like you're a rock star
Yep.
continuously.
Yeah.
You're a great sales rep. You're a rock star for a quarter at most,
Yeah.
maybe a week.
That quarter. And then, well, one of my mentors, we talked about that earlier. One of my mentors, he always jokes with me. He's like, okay, you closed a big deal. Now you got to keep your job for another 6 months. So you better get going.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
On LinkedIn. So I think my LinkedIn is just Wyatt Banks with Splunk. And I have a nice little Las Vegas sign banner
Background.
on the back.
Yeah.